Hey World Civ students, Mr. Lassiter here with you, and in this video we are going to look at the wars of classical Greece. So let's get started. A few questions to look at. First, we want you to be able to describe the causes and outcomes of the Greco-Persian Wars, the first couple of wars that we'll talk about here. In doing so, we will see some of the strengths and strategies of Sparta and Athens, which you can compare, and those will carry on into a second war, or a second series of wars known as the Peloponnesian War. And hopefully you'll be able to describe the causes and outcomes of that war as well. Some vocabulary terms here which we'll go through as we take a look at this information. So we're going to talk about two big wars here. The first one, the Greco-Persian Wars, which is a two-parter and deals with the Greek city-states versus the Persian Empire, which you see here. The green areas on this map show Greek territories, and in the orange, of course, the Persian Empire. The second series of wars that we'll talk about is the Peloponnesian War, and this involves the city-state of Athens and its allies, or the Athenian Empire, against the city-state of Sparta and its allies. So let's get started talking about Persia. Hopefully you remember them. If you recall from the last time we talked about them, they were the largest empire in the world at the time they were conquering it. They're big around the year about 500 BCE. They had strong leaders who united a large territory, and at the time they controlled about 40% of the world's population. They were originally united under Cyrus and then expanded under Cambyses and Darius I and Xerxes. And Darius and Xerxes are the two that we're going to see invade Greece. Persia does conquer some Greek-speaking territories, so there are some Greek-speaking peoples that they are in charge of. But they're going to have some trouble there, which will lead to war. The trouble starts in a place called Anatolia, the Anatolian Peninsula between the Mediterranean and Black Seas. In those areas, Greek-speaking peoples revolted against the Persians because they didn't want to pay the heavy taxes and tributes that the Persians demanded. And so there's some war fighting going on. And the city-state of Athens in the mainland of Greece, which you see on the map, helps these people out. And they go over and try to help them out with troops and funds, etc. Darius I and the Persians crush this revolt. But they aren't just happy defeating these Greek-speaking peoples in Athens. They want some revenge. And so Darius is going to start his invasion of Greece. The first invasion of Greece happens around the year 492 BCE. Darius prepares his troops and he sends them in. He invades, and the Greek city-states, including Athens and Sparta, who led this fight against the Persians, will band together for defense. They actually win a fairly lopsided victory, and part of this is because of the methods they used to fight. They had soldiers who were known as hoplites, who didn't wear much armor but moved in very tightly packed phalanxes. And these were very efficient groups that could move very quickly on the battlefield. And so they were able to basically rout the Persians, who were not used to this style of fighting. This is seen mostly in the Battle of Marathon. The Persians had burnt a city near Athens. The Athenians actually asked the Spartans to come help, but the Spartans were in the middle of a religious festival and they couldn't quite arrive yet. So the Athenians take on the Persians at this battle. There were 25,000 Persian troops, we think, and only about 10,000 Athenian troops. But because of these phalanx formations, about 6,400 Persians die and only about 200 Greeks. So the Persians kind of go home with their tail between their legs, retreating to Asia, and the Greeks manage to hold off this invasion. They go home for a little while, and Darius does not invade again, but his son Xerxes still is demanding tribute from these Greek city-states because the Persian Empire does not go anywhere. It's still there, it's still large, and still very impressive. But of course the Greeks do not think they should have to pay this tribute or this tax to be vassals of the Persian Empire. And so Xerxes, out of revenge and out of demand for this tribute, invades. But he invades with many more troops, somewhere around 180,000, we think. And once again is up against these Athenians and Spartans who band together to fight against them. The war goes back and forth. Ultimately, after an early loss by the Spartans at Thermopylae, you may have heard of that if you watch the movie The 300. It's about that. The Athenians win some big naval battles, and then later the Spartans come back and crush the Persians at the Battle of Plataea. So they end up coming back from behind, so to speak, and the Persians are forced to retreat. Xerxes retreats with his army, and they are not going to return. Now, the effects of these wars are a brief sense of unity among the Greek city-states. We also see Sparta and Athens, the two groups leading the fight against the Persians. They are going to emerge as the two major powers. There are still going to be periodic battles between Greeks and Persians, but no more invasions. So how did they manage to do this? How did the Greeks end up winning? Well, they had an inherent advantage. They had the home field advantage. They were fighting on Greek territory. But they also had better soldiers. Hoplites and the phalanx, the way they maneuvered just twice crushed the Persians. And then they also used some elements of surprise with surprise naval attacks and surprise ground battle attacks. After this war, we see the Delian League form. Athens decides that in this leadership role, they're going to create a naval alliance, a defensive alliance to protect from any future possible invasions by the Persian Empire. But in reality, Athens is actually going to end up dominating this region. They demand money, they become rich and powerful, and instead of kind of a league of equals, it's more of an Athenian empire, with Athens dominating the Aegean Sea. Other city-states don't necessarily like this, and they start to resent Athens for this domination of this entire region. And you can see in the map there the region that Athens controlled. So as a result of this dislike for Athens and this resentment, we see another alliance system develop among the Spartans, and we call this the Peloponnesian League. Many great city-states turned to Sparta, and they basically formed this anti-Athenian alliance. And so the Greek world was divided really into two camps. One, the Athenian Empire, that had an unstoppable navy, the navy that destroyed the Persians, that could hide behind city walls in Athens, and that could conduct sneak attacks by sea against Sparta and the Peloponnesian League. But Sparta had its own advantages. They had an unstoppable army. They could invade Athenian territory and pillage the countryside seemingly without end, which of course was not good for the Athenians. So how did this break out into total warfare? Well, it really started from a small conflict between some minor city-states, which end up drawing Athens and Sparta into direct conflict. Because they each have their strengths and weaknesses, neither side is really able to completely destroy the other. The war is going to drag on for 27 years. And really the only reason this is going to come to an end is because it seems that fate turns against Athens. As you can see in this image, Athens was a walled city. They were able to still access their naval ports and trade and bring in goods to supply the city. But if you're trapped with a lot of people in a walled city, it's not a good place to avoid disease, as that can easily spread. And so a plague actually hits Athens, and it weakens the city. In addition to that general weakening of Athens, Sparta decides to go to an unlikely source. They contact Persia and ask Persia for naval assistance, since Sparta knows they will never be able to match Athens at sea. And so they basically just ask Persia for boats, and they get a decent navy that eventually forces the Athenian navy to surrender. As a result of defeating Athens at sea and the weakening of Athens due to this plague that had hit their city, we see technically Sparta and their allies end up winning. But overall, the resources of both sides are drained after 27 years of war. The Athenian Empire breaks up and is dismantled, but Sparta had lost so many people in this 27 years of war that their population is never going to recover, and they will be permanently weakened as well. Eventually, a new city-state known as Thebes is going to rise up, and they will defeat Sparta in the year 404, so not long after the Peloponnesian War. Within Greece, basically from about 400 BCE to the mid-300s, there are going to be wars between city-states constantly. And so there's going to be continuous instability and conflict in Greece, which is going to make them vulnerable to outside invasions. So ultimately, nobody wins. Both superpowers are weakened by the Peloponnesian War. We see a period of chaos, and Greece is vulnerable. That's not going to be a good recipe for maintaining independence much longer. And we're going to see an outside group come in and take over. There's a map of the war. That's it for today. Go back and listen if you have anything that is not clear. Make sure you can answer these video goals questions in your notes, and have a great day.